All right, hello everybody. Next lesson that we're going to get into that's oftentimes very related and taught along with the same time frame that the distance formula is, which is our last week's concept, is what's called the midpoint formula. So if you take a look here at my first board of notes here, I jot all of this down. Be another important formula like the distance formula was last week, and a little introductory information here just like before. So what I want to stress here in very general terms on this board is it's exactly what it sounds like. Midpoint, the middle, the halfway point between a pair of given points that are on a line segment. Okay? And so then the formula associated with midpoint is right here. That's a capital M. Don't confuse it with the slope formula. So what it is a point, and what you do is given 2 points, you add the x coordinates, divide by 2 of the 2 points, and you add the y coordinates, divide those by 2. So what you're doing is finding the halfway point divided by 2 of the given coordinates. Okay, so again, halfway between the x's, halfway between the y's, and that gives you your midpoint. The other thing to stress here is that the answer must be an ordered pair, x comma y. Right, it's a point on a graph. So visually, before we get into a couple problems here, if you just jot down this graph here, and there's nothing, there's nothing real accurate about it. I just did a quick freehand sketch. But if I were to tell you to estimate what the midpoint of this is, well, maybe if I just had you draw it, much more fun than pin the tail on the donkey is pin the midpoint on the segment. Maybe I'd put it about right here. Right, so now if I asked you to label it, well, maybe you could estimate it at about, it's either maybe 1, 1 or 1 comma 1/2 or something like that, but either way it would be very close there. And if we were to use the formula on the 2 coordinates here, we would be able to figure that out by hand. So again, with this information now, let's figure out how do we use it. So you can jot these 2 examples down here. So the first one, just calculating the midpoint between these 2 points. And what I would recommend, to get a visual, make a quick little sketch in your notes there with a graph and plot those 2 points. And then maybe estimate where it should be and see if that lines up closely with what we find in the formula here. So first thing that I like to do, very similar to the distance formula, to the slope formula, is let's label our coordinates. Y2. Okay, the midpoint, as you know, it's actually even more simple because there's no radical compared to the distance formula. So remember, what I'm doing is I am taking the halfway point between the sum of the x's and the halfway point between the sum of the y's. So all I have to make sure I remember, just small mistakes here and there, keep the x's grouped together and keep the y's grouped together. So when I fill in here, x1 plus x2 is -3 plus 1 over 2. And then the y's, I do 4 plus 8 divided by 2. And then I just have to simplify these 2 quick fractions. -3 plus 1 is -2. 4 plus 8 is 12. So all this does is it leaves me then, just divide each of these by 2, works out to 2 nice whole numbers. Our midpoint, -2 divided by 2 is -1, 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the midpoint of the segment connecting these 2 points would be -1/6. And again, if you were to graph this, you should be able to come up with something very close to this for your guess. Number 2, let's move on here. Do one more to wrap up this video here. Give it a shot. See if you can calculate it first, and then maybe check your work against mine here. So pretty straightforward calculation, hopefully. But again, I'm going to go ahead and fill right into my formula. Add the x's together. 5 plus 5 divided by 2. The y's, -1 plus 6 divided by 2. All right, once again, we're just going to simplify. Now, another nice shortcut, if the x's, or if it were the y's, if they were the exact same coordinate, you can assume it's going to be that same coordinate also. So the midpoint is also going to have an x-coordinate of 5, and we'll see why. 5 plus 5 is 10. Negative 1 plus 6 is 5. And if I finish this off here, 10 divided by 2 is, sure enough, 5, like we expected. And then last, 5 divided by 2, if you want, you can leave that as 2 1/2. You can leave it as 5/2 if you want to. But either way, it doesn't matter to me. It is correct, and it is a fully simplified fraction. So again, there's our introduction to the midpoint formula. As usual, there will be a quick assignment through email to do for the week. And please see me, ask me questions during office hours if you have them.